Firebombing the White House is not terror.
So no, firebombing, of course, is.
They did.
But that's Tim. That is enormously rare on the left. So you can always go back to, hey, the guy who shot Steve Scalise. Hey, we found it one time. Okay. What you're talking about is cultural domination. And is that true in Berkeley, that the left dominates in a way that is oppressive to the right? Like
it's not the right. I'm talking about
no, I get it.
Asian salon owners.
No, I know, and to the middle as well, right? Yes, but is it also true that you'll get the same kind of cultural domination in the middle of Alabama? So if you're in the middle of Alabama and you put up a Trump sucks sign, you are going to have massive problems.
You will not get someone coming to your house and threatening to kill you.
You're nuts. Yes, you will. In fact, there's a guy who had a Trump sign in the middle of Pennsylvania, and his neighbor, a Biden sign or something, and his neighbor shot him and killed him because he's like, you're against Trump. I hate you. I'm going to murder you.
Biden sign?
I forget what the sign was, but it was something either against Trump or pro-Biden or pro-something. It happened a couple of years ago. You could definitely look it up. And so... yeah, no. There's huge parts of this country that if you say Trump sucks, they will physically assault you. I mean, look, forget the middle of the country. When I ran for Congress, we did a panel up in Palmdale, which is in, outer parts of LA. But there's like far right militia types up there as well, right? Even though it's mainly Democratic. And so it's a bunch of massive right wingers came to our panel, and I said one thing against Trump, and they nearly assaulted me. They're like, "How you can't say that about our president?" Right? Well, then they say Barack Hussein Obama's a Muslim terrorist. I said, "Wait a minute! I thought we weren't saying bad things about presidents. Yeah. What happened?" Right? So there are people that are massively full of crap on both sides.
But perhaps the issue then is these types you're describing live in sparsely populated areas. You maybe don't see them. They don't have a larger impact on greater society because of the density of cities and the amount of people who live there.
But they have a massive impact. The right wing does in the middle of the country. What we hear all the time on the Young Turks is, "Oh, thank God, I thought I was alone." Right? Like, I see you guys, and it gives me sanity because I live in the middle of Tennessee. I live in the middle of Arkansas. I live in the middle of Texas, and everyone here thinks that if you're against Trump, you're the devil, and you molest kids, and it's just like what you would call cultural terrorism. So I don't think that's fair to call terrorism on the right or the left. It's just cultural domination in certain areas. And part of what I'm trying to do here is shake people out of that and go, I hear you. And look at all the things we disagree on and all the things that I've said that probably made a bunch of right wingers angry already. But let's not lose track of the things we also agree on.
Well, so why you saw the meme from Elon Musk where it shows the line moving further and further left, and then the guy who was in the middle is now on the right.
Yeah, that line is the most full of crap line I have ever seen.
That's what I did.
I did the exact opposite line when I was a host on MSNBC a dozen years ago, because in reality, there's two different lines. There's the line that is for the country, and then there's the line that is for Washington. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the Washington line has moved so far right, I can't see it anymore. I was a liberal Republican growing up. I voted for George H.W. Bush. I was a kid when Reagan was around, but I loved Reagan, Shining City on a Hill, etc. But there was a thing called a liberal Republican back then where you could be socially liberal but still be a Republican. That just doesn't exist anymore. So when I say
conservative Democrats, yeah. It's like everyone's talking about Manchin. He can't win.
Yeah. So but Manchin's not a moderate. Manchin is a corporatist through and through.
Oh, agreed.
Okay. So
he's going to lose.
So whereas
I think he's already out. I don't know.
Whereas I was slight center right growing up with almost the same positions, I'm now considered massively left in Washington. Okay. Why? Because they all became corporatists. Biden was known as the senator from MBNA, which was a credit card company back then. That was his nickname. Yeah. Like, even the people in the Senate, they're like, oh, it's so funny. Even among us sellouts, Joe Biden's the biggest sellout. Let's call him the senator from MBNA, right? So we lost it. This is chapter 5 of my book. I'm not trying to plug the book. It's a natural thing that's coming up, and I want to go back to policy, et cetera. But chapter 4, I explain how we lost the Democratic Party. So the chapter 3 is Republicans suck. Why Republicans suck? Okay, and that explains how the Republican Party went from the party of Lincoln to, in my opinion, the party of hate. Okay, so the party changed completely, and they changed completely because of the Southern strategy. But for the Democrats, they think, oh, you're so right about that, Cenk. But I'm like, you think your party didn't change? We used to be the party of FDR, and now we're the party of credit card companies.
Wealthy, yeah. Vox, right? This was 2016. Vox called them, Democrats have become the new party of the wealthy elites.
Yeah, and it breaks my heart. But there's a lot of truth to that. But that's not the left. That's corporate Democrats in Washington. Okay.
Yeah, I subscribe to Jacobin magazine. Jacobin has been very strong on defending free speech. And so when I started seeing the articles they were posting, and of course I know a ton of people who have been consistently very left economically, and I started seeing the articles and I started reading Jacobin articles, I'm like, this is the kind of left that I want to have an argument with, one that understands the importance of free speech. And I can respect that. And I also think it's important to hear what they have to say when they're making their arguments.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm a massive, I'm very much in favor of freedom of speech. So then we talked about censorship earlier. So then the question is, again, where do you draw the lines? The world is not black and white.
Well, right? So this is a point I did want to make on that. You said, the right saying, oh no, our precious Nazis or whatever. But it's not so much our precious Nazis. It's, especially right now with Israel-Palestine, the people who are going to bear the brunt of that legislation is the pro-Palestine left.
100% agree.
So Ron DeSantis just banned. This is a bit of debate right now among Republicans. Vivek Ramaswamy is very critical of Ron DeSantis, saying this student group should be banned and forced to reform because in their school toolkit they say they are Hamas. They are not. They are Palestinians in exile who are a part of the resistance that is. I don't know how they explicitly define it. They say these are resistance fighters who attacked. We are part of that resistance. And so Ron's argument is that means they are declaring support for a terrorist organization. Therefore, we have to disband this group. Vivek says, oh, it's a bunch of kids in a college saying stupid things. Let them say stupid things.
I agree with that.
But this is what happens when you go after free speech.
Yeah. So then let's talk about where the line should be. Because everybody could look up these videos. The Young Turks have been around 21 years. We're the longest internet show in history. As far as a daily show, we've been around longer than literally any other show in internet history.
When you guys started, there were no social media platforms. You were using weird web players and stuff like old school.
Yeah, we use web players on our own website. We try to get out the word through Yahoo Messenger, through AOL. We were AOL bloggers. We put up videos on MySpace. So we are as old school gets. And so having been around so long, you have all these videos that show indisputably your consistency, right? So I was against Don Imus being fired. I didn't think Rush Limbaugh should be censored, or Glenn Beck, or when I was outraged when Megyn Kelly was fired. I'm like, okay, so she said this thing about blackface. Okay, it's wrong, and I could explain why it's wrong. But if you fire her, nobody's even going to find out why it's wrong.
She didn't say, she asked.
She asked. That's right. She didn't even say it. That's right. So if like Al Roker was upset, then guys, why don't you take the opportunity to bring in Al Roker and Megyn Kelly and have an hour-long conversation? And guess what? That'd be the highest rated show you did that year, right? And then people would learn what's wrong with blackface. Instead, you fire her, you never have that conversation, and a whole bunch of white people who've never understood the history of blackface go, what the hell, man? I don't get it. Exactly. So I was Michael Jackson in 1983 in Halloween. Well, I didn't do it because I was racist. I'm not evil, right? And that's because they don't know the history of blackface and how white people would put it on and then lynch black people, etc. But you can't blame them if they don't know, right? Yeah. So my point is, and Ben Shapiro, Ann Coulter, Charlie Kirk going on college campuses, every time I defended them, okay? So I believe in free speech completely. Now, having said that, nothing's complete, as you pointed out earlier. There's always some form of censorship. So where do I draw the line? I draw the line at verifiable but extreme hate speech, okay? So hate speech isn't, I don't like the current right-wing government of Israel. No, that's a policy position, right? Okay? And hate speech isn't, I think black people committed more crime in this country than white people. Now, I could break down why I think the context of that is wrong, right? But that's not hate speech. You're trying to have a policy discussion, and maybe you're having it in the wrong direction, but I wouldn't call that anywhere near hate speech, right? So, but if you're going around saying we have to eradicate the Jews, no, that's Nazis. Sorry.
What about from the river to the sea?
No, that's too vague. A lot of people could mean different things by from. I hate this term from the river to the sea, but different people mean different things by that.
So, and then I suppose you can cut away the nuance. We had that video out of Cooper Union, I don't know if you saw, where the students are banging on the doors with the Jewish students in the room, screaming from the river to the sea. I think that context is more clear then.
So I look, that's 100% wrong. And so I think it was Riley Gaines who had given a speech about how trans women shouldn't be allowed to compete in female sports. And she was in a college campus somewhere. I think it was in the Northwest too, but I forget. And she was scared.
They surrounded the room.
And they surrounded the room, and the cops were scared and didn't want to take her out of the room.
Is that terrorism?
So no, it's too far to call it terrorism. But is it a crime? Maybe. Like, now we're going too far, guys. And so for me, and so it gets nuanced, and this is difficult because people like to take those things and then go to extremes. So one extreme is then the Ron DeSantis extreme, where, okay, that's it. We're going to ban all people showing any kind of support to, rhetorical support to Hamas or to Palestinians or whatever. And the mainstream media shuts out both right-wing and left-wing opinions by going, these are not acceptable thought. But when you have someone captured in a room where they fear for their safety and cannot leave, you have gone too far, okay?
I'd call it terrorism.
No, it's too much to call it terrorism because, look, then you take away the power of the word, okay? So nobody got killed. Nobody even got assaulted. But at the same time, I'm not excusing it. I'm saying it might even be a crime. But when you call it terrorism, it lessens the actual terrorism that Hamas does or right-wingers here in America do.
I think this is just more of a semantic argument then, and we're defining the word differently. My understanding of terrorism is the use of fear, like threatening violence or harm in order to pursue a political goal.
Okay, I'm so glad you said that. So then let me ask you this. This morning, McKay Coppins revealed another part of the book about Mitt Romney, where Mitt Romney said that most of the Republicans that did not vote to impeach or convict Donald Trump, especially after January 6th, were because they were physically worried about their safety. They thought that right-wing supporters of Donald Trump might kill them or their family members.
Not terrorism.
Oh, come on, Tim. You just said it was terrorism.
No, I didn't. You want me to explain? I'll explain.
Okay, go ahead. I can't wait for this one.
If a bunch of Trump supporters went to their offices throwing bricks or wielding bricks and Molotovs, terrorism.
Yeah.
If a guy says
January 6th?
Absolutely.
Where is chanted, hang Mike Pence, Mike Pence.
We're referring.
So that's January 6th, definitely terrorism.
Specific people.
According to your standards, by the way. I'm not
absolutely. Specific people on January 6th. But that's a whole very nuanced conversation. And the issue with January...
Whenever it comes to the right wing, we get more nuance. But okay, go ahead.
Well, we're being nuanced with the left. I'm not saying that leftists who are privately saying, they want to eat the rich or whatever are committing acts of terrorism. If someone on the left says, I'm scared of people on the right doing something at some point, it's vague and nebulous. I'm scared of people coming here, not for political reasons.
But it's not vague and nebulous, Tim. First, January 6th already happened. I'm talking about what Mitt Romney said. And so that's in the minds of the Republicans, and he's just relaying what his colleagues told him. Okay. And then secondly, people confronted like Lindsey Graham at the airport, and he got really shook by that.
But that's not terrorism. If a crowd of people surrounds a room, banging on the door, screaming something related to killing you, that is blunt, low-level terrorism.
So wait. Okay, now your nuance is getting tricky because you're saying when right-wingers yell at people and surround them, that's not terrorism. But when the left wing does it, because they didn't say they were going to kill them in the left-wing scenarios, they surrounded the room and yelled at them, and that is terrorism? That doesn't make sense.
Well, so you're talking about people confronting a guy in an airport?
So to me, confronting people is perfectly fine.
Agreed.
Okay.
Surrounding a room and barring someone into it while screaming things is not.
It's not because
there's a line somewhere.
Yeah, and the reason why I say it might be a crime is because then they don't have freedom of movement. So false arrest is almost certainly the wrong crime, but something where you're
limiting distinction. What I'm saying,
you're limiting somebody's freedom. But Tim, if you think that the right wing guys are not physically threatening these congressmen and others, you're crazy.
I'm saying
right?
a guy.
No, they very much physically threaten them.
I'm not talking. I'm talking about If there's a guy in Congress surrounded by all of his guards, there's no active threats or anything, and he goes, I better not vote this way because someone's going to get mad. Well, that's not terrorism.
I totally agree that's not terrorism.
Right. But if people are screaming, they're screaming things at you, making demands of you, and there are acts of violence, people fighting cops and bashing cops, yes, it is.
Yeah. So if right-wingers, my sense of it is, we talked about the bubbles earlier, right? That right-wingers are in their bubble and never see the right wing attacking them. Why would they? Because they're right wingers. So you don't get to experience what we experience. And for a brief moment there, around January 6th, even the Republican congressman got to experience what the left wing experiences.
Well,
so what the left wing experiences is right wingers threatening to kill us 24/7. Now, that's not all right wingers. We're fair. We're reasonable. It's not the majority of right wingers. But is there a crazed percentage of right wingers in this country constantly threatening to murder the left-wingers, Democrats, and now Republican congressmen? Yes.
Completely agree.
Yeah. And so every left-winger,
we see it too, though.
Every left-winger in media, but only a couple of the Congress people, which is amazing, because when it happens to them, they flip out. And I'm like, oh, wow. Apparently that doesn't happen to them every day. But for people in left-wing media, our death threats from the right wing are nonstop.
When I was at Occupy Wall Street, in support of the activists, to the degree of getting the information out, rejecting the arbitrary police restrictions. Do you know who physically attacked me? It wasn't right wingers. It was the far left. It was we called them black anarchists at the time. People call them Antifa now. I mean, it's like a vague term for groups of left wing ideologues who dress up and attack people. I know that if I go to if we have people on the show who rag on Trump, the responses we get are, "You are wrong." If we go to places and we challenge the left, we get threats of violence and death.
No, not death. But
we do. We were swatted.
I'm against it.
I was swatted 15 times last year. We had.
Oh, you were?
We were swatted 15 times.
Yeah, I saw that you were swatted at least once, and I said on air, I
Bomb
hate
threats.
that. I despise that.
Spies, infiltrators. I mean, the degree of threats that we got were insane.
Yeah. So look, there is a strand of that on the extreme left. And it's always been around in the extreme left, but it got so muted. It's now back to rising up. It's bubbling up, and I'm worried about it. Whether it's tankies or whoever they are. I don't really like the Antifa thing. You guys hyped up so much, and then they never arrived.
What do you mean? They did.
There was barely any Antifa. Meanwhile, there's like right-wing militias everywhere.
Well, and
there's like 2 Antifa dudes in Portland, but there are extreme left, and they are getting more extreme.
How many people
now?
How many people died in the occupation in Seattle?
I don't know.
I think 3.
I wouldn't doubt that.
It's particularly disconcerting when far leftists with rifles take over several city blocks.
Yeah, that was a disaster.
And they unloaded 300 rounds into an SUV with 2 teenagers in it. I don't know if they both died. There were, I think, maybe potentially 3 deaths specifically there. But it's like, hey, that's what we're talking about. That happened,
So that definitely happened, and that's what I mean
and
by
the George Floyd occupation as well in Minneapolis. You also had shootings. There's a video of a car driving through, and they're unloading rounds into that car. So
there's a difference. There's so many nuances here, and I say it both about the right and the left. So in the case of the George Floyd issues, the riots are different than the occupations, right? So the riots are great frustration, but then after the riots is the looting. And the looting is not frustration. That's just stealing. Okay. And then the occupations are not the rioting. They're usually white people. Okay. Yep. And
white liberals
who are like zany extremists. And so if you're on the left and you think we're talking about you, no, we're not talking about you. We're talking about the guys who say that there should be no laws within this city block or within these X city blocks. And whenever you have no laws, you know what happens? Chaos.
The most brutal people take over.
Yeah, every time. And by the way, why do you think Hamas took over took over Gaza? Because when people are desperate and times are tough, extremists win.